the Gemara that we learned, we went through a few interesting points, a few interesting things yesterday. One of them was, I guess we reviewed some stuff from the day before. So about Eretz Yisrael being, it was created first. Everything else is called outside. There's Eretz and there's Chutzos. And so first mentions Hashem created Eretz Yisrael, and then Chutzos, then the outskirts. We mentioned about Hashem waters Eretz Yisrael first. Eretz Yisrael drinks first from the water. Everything else gets the leftovers. The Gemara said similar to cheese. Then the Gemara said that regarding that debate between the where the rain comes from. So we had a pasuk that in a statement from the Brisa that the Brisa said they get sweet, the water gets sweet in the clouds, which on a simple level, on a literal level, it would mean that the clouds are cleaning the waters, but the seeming understanding is that it doesn't mean literally that the clouds are sweetening the waters. It means that they get sweet when they go to when the water goes up to the cloud. It gets sweetened because it leaves the salt. And the Gemara brought a proof from it, a pasuk, choshchas and choshras, where you have two letters that are switched between the way the pasuk is brought in different places. And basically taught us that Hashem prepares the water, and the preparation of the water mean that there's some change that's happening to the water, and what is that change that's happening that's being fixed? It's the salt is being removed, and the water is going to be now sweetened. And the Gemara mentioned that Rabbi Yeshua learned something else. He says it's teaching us something about rain, about how do you know you have a lot of rain? It's because if it's dark clouds, it means it'll be a lot of rain. If it's light clouds, then it's a small amount of rain, and that's what the pasuk is telling you. Now, the Gemara then said about this statement of a brisa, interesting statement. It said the upper waters are hanging from Hashem's mimer, from Hashem's utterance, and that's what's causing them to stay in their place. In other words, the waters were always mixed together on the first day of creation. And in the second day of creation, what Hashem did was he said, Yehi rakia b'seich hamayim, let there be a heaven, a firmament. And it'll go in between the waters, and then the upper waters will be high up, and the lower waters will be down here on earth, on the oceans, the seas. And the same distance that there is between the earth waters in the heavens is the same distance between the heavenly waters and the heavens. The heavens is in between. So if, let's say, there's 5 miles upward, vertical from the water to the heavens, then there's from the heavens and above, there's 5 miles from there going up, and that's where you have the upper waters, the higher waters. That's basically the beginning of Genesis when it talks about the day 2. That was what was done on day 2. There was a firmament, the separation between the two waters. So it says they were hanging there from the mimer of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem's statement. Hashem said, "Let there be a firmament in between," and that from Hashem's utterance that caused that the water is hanging from the mimer, from the statement of Hashem. But the main point that the Gemara is bringing is that its fruit is the rainwater. the fruit of those waters is the rainwater. Now, what is the fruit of those waters is rain? It means that the um, moisture that it gives off, there's some type of fruit. In other words, it doesn't minimize what's there. Whatever is there stays there, but there is some type of a uh, fruit product that's caused by this upper waters, and that's what the rain is. The rain is that it's something that it produces. The water, the upper waters, cause there to be some type of moisture, and it doesn't minimize the upper waters at all, but there is moisture, and from that moisture, it causes there to be rain. And who does that statement go like? So he brings a pasuk even. They translate a verse into Tehillim. It says, "Mipri ma'asecha tisbah haaretz," from the fruit of your work, the earth is satiated. And the Gemara says that seems to fit with this concept that the rainwater comes from the upper waters. My understanding of this is that if you follow that logic, follow that scientific path, that the rain comes from the upper waters, that basically means that the earth doesn't really it doesn't really replenish. It doesn't really replenish above, because the upper waters, the waters above, not necessarily are they getting more. We don't know that they're getting any more water. Clouds get water. Clouds get the vapor goes up to the clouds, but to say that the upper waters get some type of a recycling of the waters from below, it doesn't seem like that would be part of that way of thinking. Again, the other opinion would follow that. The other opinion says it comes from the ocean and it ultimately goes to the clouds. But it seems like this opinion doesn't hold that way, and that's why the Gemara seems to be following this idea that the peiros, meaning it's not losing any water, it's just fruits, just like fruits. It doesn't take away from the principle of the tree. Fruits, that's what's calling rain is called fruits, because it doesn't take away from the principle of the upper waters. And so that water, the Gemara's understanding that opinion is Rabbi Yoshua, who followed that logic that the rain comes from there. It's called peiros. So it all seems to fit with Rabbi Yoshua. Again, that's my own little insight. I don't know if that's but Rashi emphasizes that. Seemingly, Rashi does make a big deal out of this, that it's the fruits you don't lose anything from the original. Even brings a pasuk Pelegalakim Mali Mayim, that the Hashem's stream is full with water, it never loses anything. So it doesn't seem like that view holds of recycle, that the water gets recycled above. Anyway, so that follows Rabbi Yeshua. Of course, Ben wants to tell us that even that opinion holds of the other opinion. Okay,
no,
I got that.
No.
Okay, what do you want
to
tell us?
I wanted to say, when they say fruits, they don't mean something to eat. They
Right.
mean the result of this action.
Yeah, produce. There's some
rain.
type of, something developed. Yes, there's a development
the
of moisture.
consequence
Right?
is
It
rain.
uses something that doesn't take away from the principle, and it just gives and
It
just
creates
adds,
the rain.
it adds something, right? Fruits, the fruits of your hands, Maise yadai. Yeah. So so then the Gemara says, but what does Rabbi Eliezer do with that pasuk? And yesterday I was a little stuck with this, and I must tell you that none of the commentaries seem to talk about it. And what bothered me yesterday was that the Gemara just concludes very simply that, Rabbi Eliezer learns the pasuk that is talking about the Maise Yodav Shel HaKadosh Baruch. It's the work of the hands of Hashem. And what it seems to be saying is it's not talking about the rain. It's talking about just the works of Hashem, or it's definitely not talking about the heavenly waters. But it doesn't. None of the commentaries seem to pick up on this. In fact, there are versions of this that it says that it's talking about not Maaseh Yadav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is a text that has a little differently. It's talking about Briyaseh Shel Olam, the creation of the world. There is such a text. But anyway, the commentaries don't seem to talk about it. There's only one commentary that really mentions a little about it, and that's the Maharsha, but he doesn't really add that much. He basically says that it's talking about the water that was created, that is that the earth is satiated by the water that Hashem created. Hashem created, on the third day of creation, Hashem separated the waters, and the waters that were separated on the third day, that was the water that is basically it's limited, that it doesn't spread out. In other words, Hashem limited the waters on the third day, that he made dry land and he made waters. And the Maaseh Yadav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the way the Maharsha puts it, is that let me just pull it up over here. Maharsha says that Maaseh Yadav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He brings Rashi, doesn't explain it. The commentaries don't say anything, and he says that it's the Brias Hamayim, when Hashem created the water, Baras Hamayim, in order to satisfy the earth. The problem that I had with this is, I guess you don't have to say the third day. You could say the second day, first day, when water was created. But the creation of water that satisfies the earth. The only problem is, why does it use the term peiros? That it's the fruits. The fruits is supposed to emphasize that you don't lose any of the principle. But here, it's not exactly that. It's the water is actually used. So that was what was bothering me a little yesterday when we were learning it, that the Gemara is trying to explain this verse, but it's not really fitting the details that we tried to explain when Rabbi Yeshua said it. How do you fit those details? And also, why can't Rabbi Eliezer learn it that the pasuk is talking about let it talk about the ocean. The ocean is the mipri maisecha, from the fruits of your labor, of your work. Hashem created the oceans. From the fruits of your labor, you satisfy the earth by the water ultimately going up in recycling itself, and it causes why can't he learn it that way? That's about the oceans ultimately come as rain. So that was another question that was bothering me as well. So number one is what exactly, how do you translate the peiros, the fruits, that it seems to be taking away from the principle? And second of all, that the seemingly Rabbi Eliezer could just say it's talking about the rain, just like the other rabbi learned that it's talking about the upper waters. Let Rabbi Eliezer say it's talking about the ocean. The ocean turns into rain. It satisfies the earth. So the way the Gemara says it is, it's basically talking about water, that Hashem creates water, and water it satiates the earth, and that is basically the meaning
and the
of
benefit is
the meaning of the pasuk. He created it in order to satisfy the earth. He created the water in order to satisfy the earth. Seemingly it's not such a strong question unless you want to translate peiros, that it means that the principle is not ruined. Anyway, I didn't see any commentaries on it, so we're going to move forward from that. That was, again, it was yesterday's Gemara. Another Gemara that we learned yesterday was about Gan Eden, which was also an interesting Gemara, that it says that the whole world only gets the leftovers of what the Garden of Eden is watered. And it said that, then it brought a brisa. It says that what the vessel that is used to water 60, not 60, what a vessel that's used for 30 saw, which is called a base core. Base core is measure of 30 saw. The vessel that's used to water that measurement of land is called a base saw. 30 base core, 30 saw. That measurement vessel, normally has a leftover after it waters it for 3 calves. 3 calves is the term for it in the Aramaic is called a tarkav, which basically means tray the kav, 2 and a kav, which means 3 calves. So there's always a leftover of 3 calves in that vessel after it waters the base core. Why is that? Why does it always have a leftover? Because there's always 1/60th that's left. You always give a little extra 1/60th. So the Gemara says that the earth is getting from the leftovers of Gan Eden. What the understanding is that it's 1/60th. Like it sounds like Gan Eden is 60 times the size of the earth, and therefore the water that the earth gets is that leftover in the vessel that Hashem uses, so to speak, that Hashem uses to water Gan Eden. So he waters the earth with the leftovers. So similar to when a person waters a base core, he has a 1/60th left over. So here also Hashem waters Gan Eden. He uses the leftovers to water earth. And then the Gemara brought a brisa. It said Eretz Mitzrayim, Egypt, is 400 parsa by 400 parsa, and that's 1/60th of Cush. In Cush is 1/60th of the world. And the world is 1/60th of the Garden of Eden, and the Garden of Eden is 1/60th of Eden, and Eden is 1/60th of Gehenna, and it comes out that the whole world is a tiny little thing compared to Gehenna, compared to hell. It's called the Gemara uses the term as a pot cover, so it's insignificant compared to the size. It's like a small kisui hakadera cover to the pot, small pot cover compared to the entire pot of which we're calling hell, Gehenna. So the Gehenna, we're using the term a pot, and the earth, we're using a term the cover. So the implication is that it's 1/60th. So again, what comes out from here is that the world is 1/60th of the Garden of Eden. And that seems to fit with what the Gemara just said before, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that he said the world gets the leftovers of the Garden of Eden. And he continued that we learned that the leftovers is like from a base core is 1/60th is a tarkov, is 3 calves. So
Rabbi,
the world gets that. Now, yes.
That makes us feel very insignificant.
Yeah,
but we're not. We're very significant.
But it tells you that hell is big enough for everybody.
Hell is very big.
We don't have to wait in line to get a seat.
Right.
There's room.
If they give you a seat.
Now, the interesting thing is then it says that there's 2 opinions. Well, some say that Gehenna has no measure, and which either means literally or it means it's just bigger than anything else that we know. And the other statement is some say that Eden, not Gehenna, not hell doesn't have a measurement, but that Eden has no measurement, and that they bring on the bottom over here. Gehenna is so great, more than 60 of Eden, that you can't compare Gehenna. I'm not really sure what it means over here on the bottom. He tries to add something over here. It's much more than the 60 ratio.
I think they're both big enough for everybody.
Anyway, whatever. The Gemara says that there's 2 opinions. One says Gehenna has no measurement. One says Eden has no measurement. So, which basically means that they're much bigger than anything, than being able to compare it and use as a way of source of reference, a place of reference. I did want to just mention one thing, that the Rambam interestingly brings a halacha from this Gemara. You'd think that this is like such homiletic insights that aren't so practical, but the Rambam brings, and I just pulled it up over here. It brings on the laws of kings. The Rambam brings that all the lands you're allowed to dwell in, except Egypt. You're anywhere in the world except Egypt, from Min Hayam Hagadol, from the Mediterranean Sea, Viad Hamarav, until the west, 400 parsa by 400 parsa. And it is Keneged Eretz Kush, it's next to Kush, and it's Keneged Hamidbar, it's next to the desert. So borders on Kush and it borders on the desert. All of this is usher, it's prohibited to dwell there. It's prohibited to dwell there. And in 3 places, the Torah prohibits us from returning to Egypt. And it brings, Hashem has told you, you must never again return on that path. That's in Deuteronomy 17. You shall not see it again, Deuteronomy 28. You shall never see them again forever. And that is in Shemos in Exodus 14. Alexandria is included in this prohibition. Now, where does the Rambam get this? That the exact land of Egypt is 400 parsa by 400 parsa. Seemingly, he gets it from our Gemara. Our Gemara says it's seeming. I wouldn't have assumed this originally. You know, you learn the Gemara, you think that it's just telling you like some interesting thing about Egypt and about how big Cush is and how big Aden is, and Gehenna, how big is Gehenna. But the Gemara says Egypt is 400 parsa by 400 parsa, which the Rambam is basically telling us that the Gemara means that if you return to Egypt, it's not necessarily what we consider Egypt today, or what we can imagine was Egypt of then in the time when the Jewish people were there, but it actually has a halachic ruling that it has a size of 400 parsa by 400 parsa. That's what's included in the prohibition of returning to Egypt. You know, so this has a halacha element to it. Now, I don't know where you start calculating. The Rambam says it borders on Kush, but we don't know exactly what's necessarily the land of Kush. But this has a halacha element to it, that how big is that land of Egypt that you are prohibited to return to, and that is it's 400 parsa by 400 parsa, which we sort of made a calculation saying that a parsa is I forget what we said, but I see over here in the English over here, they do have a calculation that a parsa is, I think they said 7 kilometers, 4 kilometers, a parsa. They use a word parsane. I don't know if that's a common word for measuring land, but it's 4 kilometers. So 400 of those, 1,600 kilometers by 1,600 kilometers, basically. Okay, so yeah, David, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was asking about if any of the commentaries talk about the difference between Gan Eden and Eden.
Well, we know that the Gan Eden is just the garden that's within Eden, you know. So it's the Nahar Yotze Mi Eden. There's a river that goes out of Eden, Lahashkos Es Hagan, to water the Gan, you know. But it's I mean, our Gemara says that the garden is 1/60th of Eden. I mean, I don't know. I didn't see much commentary. I'm not really sure if they. I mean, the problem is that the commentaries. There might be another source to look up more commentaries for Agadata, for homiletic Gemaras. I don't think they do such a great job here in this Gemara that I have. So I don't think they speak about it, but I'll take a look for you. Yeah, doesn't say anything about Aden versus Gan. Nope. This Gemara doesn't have one. I don't see the commentaries here. They make a summary, a lot of the commentaries here, and they don't have much. But there might be another source. Let's see, maybe in the back. I have something else here. No, they don't compare Gan Eden to Eden. Okay. So the Gemara continues, and we did the next piece, and that was that Rabbi Shaya says that Bavel is very low. It's like a valley, and the waters from other lands come and water it. So it's always filled with grain. And he translates a verse in Jeremiah to mean that because it dwells on a lot of water, which means it's water pours into it from the higher lands, so therefore it has always has grain. And then Rob said that it's rich. Bavel is rich because it you can harvest it. It doesn't need rain because seemingly because of this concept that the water that it gets, it doesn't need rain because it gets water. It's always moist. And Abaye says we have a rule that the land is always Tuvani and not Yuvshani. It's always moisty and not dry. It's always moist and not dry. Okay, then the Mishnah, and that's what we concluded with. The Mishnah, yesterday we said that the Mishnah, we have different opinions as to when do you start asking for rain. We have the third day of Cheshvan is when you would start asking for rain. The same Talu Matar, Hashem, may you give rain to us. In that opinion, if you remember earlier in the Gemara, we spoke about the early rains and that there's apropos times for those early rains. And those times that we mentioned on page 6, page Vav, 6a, so it mentioned 3 opinions. One opinion was Reb Meir, that the first rain should be on the 3rd of Cheshvan. The second rain would be on the 7th of Cheshvan, and the third rain would be on the 17th. The second opinion was Reb Yehuda, who said one step further, later. And that was that the first rain is the 7th, the second one is the 17th, the third is the 23rd. And the third opinion was Rabbi Yossi, and he pushes everything one step ahead. And that means the first rain, according to Rabbi Yossi, is the 17th, then is the 23rd, and then is Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which means that we have altogether 5 times when it's apropos to rain. 5 dates. We have the 3rd of Cheshvan, the 7th, the 17th, the 23rd, and Rosh Chodesh Kislev. According to one opinion, it's the first 3 are the correct ones. According to another opinion, it's the middle 3. And according to the final opinion, it's the later 3. Out of those 5 dates that I just mentioned, 3rd of Cheshvan, 7th of Cheshvan, 17th of Cheshvan, 23rd of Cheshvan, and Rosh Chodesh Kislev, those are 5 dates that when are the first rain, the second rain, and the third rain, and the rabbis defer on to which ones to put at which of those dates. But basically, we have 3 opinions, and our Mishnah now said that's when it's apropos to rain. Then our Mishnah says, when do you actually ask? So we have one opinion is the 3rd of Cheshvan. That makes a lot of sense. If that opinion holds that the 3rd of Cheshvan is the day that it's apropos for rain, then you should ask for rain on that day, right? So probably Rabbi Gamliel follows that view that the apropos time for rain is the 3rd of Cheshvan. That's the first opinion here, the 3rd of Cheshvan. The second opinion is Rabbi Gamliel. He says that the 7th day of Cheshvan is the time to ask for rain. So if you just read that, you probably would say that his opinion follows the view that the 7th of Cheshvan is the most apropos time for rain. The only problem is Rabbi Gamliel then says a reason. Why do you ask for rain on the 7th of Cheshvan? The reason is because we want the last one who's in Eretz Yisrael to return to be from his pilgrimage to Nahar Pras, to the waters of the Euphrates. And we want him to get there maybe before the rain comes, and therefore we push off asking for rain until the 7th. Now, if you learn that way, that we push off asking for rain until the 7th, then you would learn this Mishnah that Rabbi Gamliel really agrees with the first view, that the apropos time for rain is the 3rd. But the problem is people are going to get all muddy if they're going to have problems returning. So therefore, we push it off to the 7th. So not because Rabbi Gamliel holds the 7th is the apropos time for rain. Really, the 3rd is the apropos time for rain. But we can't ask for rain then, so we have to push it off. So we'll push it off till the 7th. So this way, the people, when they return, at least that's a simple understanding, they're returning from to Nahar Pras, to the Euphrates, and wherever else they live. That's one of the more famous places. So therefore, they push off asking for rain until the 7th. But really, Rabbi Gamliel agrees the 3rd day of Cheshvan would be the apropos time for rain.
Who says that Tetvav is the day?
No, Tesvav means 15 days after the end of Sukkot, which is the 7th of Cheshvan. It's just a number of days, 15. It's not a date. It's not a date. It's a number of days. 15 days after Shmini Atzeres would be the 7th of Cheshvan.
Okay, thank you.
So these are the two ways of understanding it. There is a third way of understanding Rabbi Gamliel, and that is that Rabbi Gamliel really holds that the apropos time for rain is not the 3rd and not the 7th. It's actually the 17th. But Rabbi Gamliel holds that you should ask for rain a little before its time, before the apropos time for it. And therefore, he says we'll do it at the 7th because there's no longer an issue of people returning from their pilgrimage. So we could start right then and ask for rain a little before, 10 days before, the apropos time for rain, which is the 17th. So that is a third view. Again, I'm sharing with you the commentaries that discuss the view of Rebbe Gamliel, which seemingly could have some difference in halacha, because even though Rebbe Gamliel seems to say a blanket statement that the 7th day is the time to start asking for rain, but there is a big question on Rebbe Gamliel. And that is, what would Rebbe Gamliel hold after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed? When the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, unfortunately, what day would you then ask for rain? Because we don't have to wait for people to return from their pilgrimage. And depending on what the apropos date is for the rain, that would seemingly have an impact on what day you should ask for rain in the time of the Churban, in the time when there's no Beis Hamikdash. It seemingly could have an effect, except for the fact that there are views that even in the time of the Churban, people still would be Oile Regel. They would still travel to Jerusalem. And if that's so, then the same law that Rabbi Gamliel says in the Mishnah for the time of the Beis Hamikdash would apply even after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash as well. Yes, David.
What about in a leap year?
So the leap year wouldn't affect the difference between when people are traveling back and forth, to Eretz Yisrael. But maybe what you mean to ask is, what about in a leap month? Meaning there's two types of months that we have. We have Tishrei could be a male, a full month, And Tishrei could be a chaser, a missing month, because the lunar months are 29 and a half days. So we have to have some months. You can't have a half a day month. So you have to do, some months are 29 days, some months are 30 days. So because of that, in our calendar, Tishrei is always a complete month. But if Tishrei would be a missing month, it would only be 29 days, then seemingly Rebbe Gamliel should say not the 7th of Cheshvan, but if you calculate 15 days, then it should be the 8th of Cheshvan. Right? So that may be your question. Is that what you're asking, David?
No, I was thinking along the lines of the way that the month corresponds, like just to see how it corresponds to our calendar. So frequently, the Hanukkah falls out around December 25th, and that's Hanukkah. So this year, for instance, by the December 25th, it's already the 13th of Teves.
Mhm.
So that's because of the discrepancy of the
11 days.
of the year, of the whether it's a leap year or not leap year.
Mhm. So you're saying that really, if we want to know when is the apropos time to rain, we should follow the solar calendar, not the lunar calendar. And why is
No.
the argument? Why are the rabbis discussing and debating the 3rd day of Cheshvan, the 7th day of Cheshvan, the 17th of Cheshvan, when it really is connected to the sun? The apropos time to rain should be connected more to the sun than to the moon.
No. I'm saying that it should be connected. We go by the lunar calendar, but the lunar calendar changes from year to
Right.
year because of it doesn't correspond to the solar calendar because of the leap years.
Right. Well, not because of leap years, because it loses 11 days. So
Right.
what you're saying is maybe we should follow the solar calendar,
No.
which is a good question, because
Yeah.
in outside of Israel, we do follow the solar calendar, and we start asking for rain on December 4th. So we actually follow the solar calendar. It's an interesting question, that it would seem like the lunar calendar is not always so exact with regard to the rain, because seemingly the produce should be dependent on more the solar year rather than the lunar year, because it fluctuates, and because it fluctuates, we lose days and then we add days. So losing days seemingly every year, we're 11 days earlier. So maybe the produce really needs to wait another 11 days to have the rain in its right time. In other words, that it just seems to be like that's a pretty good question, and that's why the rabbis deciding it based on the lunar year, on the lunar calendar. That's a good question.
Then I'm also wondering, like for instance, in our like right now, we just ended the end of hurricane season, and if that corresponds to anything with the calendars and the dates. We just had the end of hurricane season just a couple of days ago, so I don't know if that's indicating any connection between one and the other.
Right. Anyway, I'm not sure how to answer that. That's a good question. We'll have to keep our eyes open if there are any discussions about that. But seemingly your question would apply also, like, when do you start fasting? If it doesn't rain by a certain date, maybe that also should be based on the solar. Yes, Moshe.
I just wanted to mention, backtrack a little bit about Bavel and about the waters, I think, to the Euphrates are there to nourish the lands in order to help the grains grow. I also want to say that's not the only country that does that in the Middle East. You also have the Nile from Sudan. The water is split and it goes into the Nile in Egypt. I think there's a Blue Nile. Okay,
it's a little hard to hear you, Moshe, but
yeah,
the bottom line is that
somebody in the background is making noise. Yeah, but the Nile brings waters to nourish the lands in Egypt too. It's also
Uh-huh.
a similar situation. It's not just Babel, you know. So I'm wondering why, you know, they just specifically refer to the Euphrates, you know, in Babel.
Because that's where Jews were.
I think you're at putting two Gemaras together. One Gemara spoke about Babylon being low and it always has water, and it doesn't really need rain because the waters from the other lands cause it to the waters spread because it falls to the lowest location, and that's Bavel. And then the other Gemara which is a Mishnah, is talking about the Euphrates. Is that are you connecting the two?
More or less, but it seems like they're restricting it to Babel, that they're not, that there's other countries where this happens, you know, where the waters nourish the lands and cause emblements to, you know, to grow. I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, I don't know if the Gemara is saying that Bavel is the only place like this. Just the Gemara mentions it because it discusses it in a verse and it's talking about Babylon, but doesn't mean to exclude other places. So I don't know if that's really a question. But maybe what you mean to ask is, why does the Mishnah specifically concerned about people returning to the Euphrates, and why is it not concerned about other locations?
That's right. That's right.
Maybe that's what your question is.
Well, maybe the Euphrates is the furthest place from the Beit HaMikdash.
So it's the furthest famous place.
Famous place for a big.
In other words, it's a
number
well-known
of
location.
Jews.
So
There are
that
big
would
number of
seemingly be
Jews
the
that were there at that period.
Now, some say there is an understanding here that it has to do with the Euphrates specifically. And in other words, the first answer that I'm giving you is that the Euphrates is just one example, because that was a famous place that's far, you know, and so it gives that example. But the other answer, and this is also mentioned as well in the commentaries, is that the Euphrates, when it rains, that water it gets so large that people can't pass over it, and they won't be able to go across it to return to their house, and it'll cause that they won't end up wanting to come back to be Oila Regel, to do the pilgrimage. So it's specifically referring to the Euphrates because if they do daven for rain and it rains, it'll get too large and it'll be hard for them to cross it. Now, that would seemingly, well, I guess maybe that's what you mean, that it connects to this concept, because the waters in Israel will cause they fall. Maybe that's what you mean, Moshe. The waters in Israel are gonna drain into the Euphrates and cause it to expand, and ultimately, because the Babylon is basically the valley of all the lands, including Eretz Yisrael. So it sort of will pour into Bavel, and ultimately it'll get too large for people to cross it. And
All the water.
so that's the other reason why it gives it an example of the Nahar Pras, that would be a problem to cross and reach there if they daven for rain first. What did you say, Ben?
All the water from Israel, from Egypt, they go into the Mediterranean.
The rain falls into the Mediterranean?
The is going into the Persian Gulf. It's not going to the Mediterranean.
But the
Euphrates, even Bavel, the water is going to the Persian Gulf.
The water from Bavel goes to the Persian Gulf. What about the water from Israel, the rainwater that's in Israel? Where does that fall?
Goes to the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean? Why? Israel is one big. Can't it go both?
All the rivers going to the Mediterranean.
The rivers. But what about the rain?
Yes.
What about
the rain goes into the rivers?
It goes into the rain goes in the rivers, and that goes back into the ocean. It's just streams that go like veins that go into the ocean.
But what about the so like the Jordan River? Where does that go into?
The Dead Sea.
To the Dead Sea, and it ends there, leaves all the salt there.
So you're saying the right side of Israel, but what about the lands of Gad, Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Manasseh? What about those lands?
I really don't know, but
Okay, so that would probably be.
I don't know if they have big rivers there.
So fine, but that water would end up
It
ultimately
goes
going into
the Jordan River, probably.
It would go to the Jordan on the left side. What about the Euphrates on the right side? What about on the east side? It'll probably go into the Euphrates.
The Euphrates is so far north; it goes into the Persian Gulf.
Euphrates is not just north; it's a long river.
North and east, yeah.
In east. Right. So I would think that maybe that's what it means, that the prayer of rain will ultimately affect those lands that are east of the Jordan River, and that prayer of rain would cause that the rains would fall into the Euphrates. Those rains would end up ultimately ending in the Euphrates.
Yeah.
And that would cause that the Euphrates would get too large. It would be hard for them to cross it. It will cause that the people wouldn't want to be Oila Regel. They won't want to do the pilgrimage. I think we figured it out. Must be those rains. Maybe. Okay. Yes, David.
I'm not sure if we mentioned this before, but is there a connection to these dates in Cheshvan to the date of Noach that the rains start to fall in Cheshvan?
Why?
That the flood has something to do with the fact that the rain Yud Zayin, not only that, you could add to it. Yud Zayin is, according to some opinions, that is the real date of the first day of when rain is supposed to fall. I guess maybe it is connected because initially when Hashem caused the water the rain to fall with Noach, it was initially Gishmei Bracha. When the people didn't listen, it turned into a flood.
So that was established as the rainy season.
The rainy season is Gishmei is the 17th. Maybe that's that would be a reason to say that's.
But that's not what the rabbis say. The rabbis don't even mention it.
That's what I was wondering, if the rabbis are mentioning it, or maybe there is some kind of thought like that.
Then
The
they
rabbis-
should have then they would have mentioned it.
The rabbis in the
Oh.
Gemara don't, but then maybe the Mefarshim do, or maybe the other.
The 17th is a blessing or asking for rain with a blessing, not a curse.
I mean, it just so happens, it's not a coincidence that the 17th of Cheshvan is one of the exact dates. I mean, there's only a limited number of days that are mentioned. The 17th is prominent, and the 17th is prominent according to the Mabul for the rainy season. So I'm wondering if there is a connection. Even though it's not.
The Mabul, most of the trouble came from the earth, water coming up from the earth.
I'm not really sure if you can, Ezra, I don't know if you could say, just because the rabbi, none of them seem to say a reason why they think it's more apropos.
I think the reason why they said it was so that the pilgrims could get back home before having to travel in really very difficult on difficult roads. And that's the reason why they say wait the period of time until people have gone back and then pray for rain, unless you're in Eretz Yisrael.
But those difficult roads.
Yeah, but what do you mean? Why would there be three? Excuse me. Why would there be three different opinions? In other words, if the people needed to travel, Rabbi Gamliel mentions that. But the first opinion doesn't say anything about traveling. So seemingly they did have different reasons about, why you would want to ask for rain. And seemingly Rabbi Gamliel is saying a reason of traveling. The other opinion is saying a reason why it's a good time for it. And it could be they have a source. I like what David says, because the pasuk in Parshas Noach, it says, "Vayihi hageshem al haaretz." The rain was on the earth, and Rashi is bothered. The rain was on the earth for 40 days. It should say the Mabul, the flood, is not some nice rain. This destroyed the entire humanity. So Rashi says no. It actually started off as Gishmei Bracha, started off as a blessing, and so and that was the 17th of Cheshvan. So according to that, you could say that the opinion that says the 17th of Cheshvan is the apropos time for rain, you could say he sees a hint for it, at least in the Mabul. Or, the Mabul was supposed to be Gishmei Bracha. So when did it rain? On the 17th of Cheshvan. That would have been the perfect time to have Gishmei Bracha, rain for a blessing. It ended up that people didn't do tshuva, so Hashem made it into a Mabul. But that would seemingly, I think that's a good insight, David. Again, the Gemara earlier didn't really say reasons why the rabbis felt that this is the apropos time for rain. Logically, you would have said it has to do with the agriculture, but even so, it seems surprising why some would say this is better for the agriculture. Some would say, that would be better. But this is This is a nice hint, I think.
I always
notice on the
reason
17th of Cheshvan is when there's a lot of rains in locally here. There's a lot of rain around the 17th.
Oh, really?
Of
You've calculated it?
No, I calculated.
About that old might have the answer.
Okay, Ezra, you wanted to say something. I'm sorry, you got cut off.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Some rabbis were Israel centric, and other rabbis were Bavel centric. And I think that that's the reason why they gave their answers the way they did. The ones that said the earlier time is because Israel is the most important thing. The rest of it, okay, it'll take care of itself. The others who lived in Bavel, they worried about their people, and so they said, wait for the rains so that our people could get back and not have difficulty getting back. And then you can ask for the rain to be the way it is. And I think that those are the basic two reasons why they said what they said. Okay. Nobody talked about the fact that this is connected to the Mabul. In fact, if anything, I wouldn't even bring up the Mabul because that's a negative connotation to what you want to connect the rains to.
Not exactly. It says Geshem. It says over there Geshem, Gishmei Bracha. Rashi brings down that it was meant to be Gishmei Bracha. So I don't think it's a negative thing at all.
But what do we remember?
But it's okay. I hear you.
What do we remember? We don't remember Gishmei Bracha. We remember the Mabul that basically destroyed the earth. That is what remains in people's memories.
That could be, but it still could be a source that, in other words, I'm not disagreeing that maybe the Mabul is something negative, but it still would be a source that if you want to know when rain of blessing is, I think it's a good source that it says the 17th, and that was supposed to be Gishmei Bracha, supposed to be a rain of a blessing. Now, then you could take it a step further and say, well, it was really supposed to start a week earlier, and it was only because of Mesushelach passed away, the Avelos of Mesushelach. So then you could ask, maybe it should be really 10 days earlier. But in any event, it does seem like there does seem to be a little hint. And again, Ezra, I think there are two Gemaras that we're dealing with here. One is the Mishnah that we learned yesterday, page 10, and the other is the Gemara on page 6, which none of them say a reason. And over there, so you could have your interpretation that maybe it has to do with different rabbis specifically concentrating on different places. But that Gemara on page 6 was talking about when is the apropos time for rain. It didn't really say anything clearly about when to ask. It just said about the time when it's expected. When is the apropos? We seem to understand from there when it would be a time to fast. When would be the time to fast if it doesn't rain by a certain date. But it didn't really say clearly when is the specifically date to start asking. It just says when's the apropos time for the Reviya Rishona, Reviya Shnia, Reviya Shlishis, the three early rains that create. So I'm not disagreeing. You have a nice shot. Maybe that it has to do with Egypt and Israel and different concentration that they have on different specifics, interests of theirs. But there could be other pshatim as well. So anyway, we'll have to also, we could look into those the rabbis' names, see where they lived in which place. That would be interesting to connect. Yes, Moshe.
Wouldn't that be, if that were the case, wouldn't the Yerushalmi Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud both have different Tanaim that would, or different Rebbeim that would mention different things? I mean, if that were the case.
Well, you have to
Based on-
understand
based
that the Babylonian that there were rabbis that traveled back and forth. So there are quotes in our Gemara about Jerusalem, what would go on in Jerusalem, what the rabbis, there would say, and so on. And so it's not necessarily so that you'd only find one way of thinking in one Gemara, and you wouldn't find it in the other Gemara. Also, you have to understand the Mishnah was central for everyone. The Gemara is where you had the different different writings, but the actual Mishnah is where we see these differences, not really in the Gemara anyway. So it really started in the Mishnah.
Is it marginal between the two, the differences between the two based on this?
Well, I mean, we'll soon see in our Gemara that there is a difference in Israel when they start asking for rain, and the difference in outside of Israel. But that's it's not really connected to the Gemara of Israel and the Gemara of Babylon. Okay, so bottom line is we only have like a minute left, so let's just start the Gemara. Amar Rav Elazar halacha Rabbi Gamliel. We're on page 10a, and if you have the art scroll, we are on 10. Let me find it for you. 10a2, 10a3, no, 10a2, 10a2. Amar Rav Elazar halacha Rabbi Gamliel. The top of the page. The Rav Elazar says the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel. Now, even when the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, the question is it for his reason? That it could be the halacha follows his view, but not necessarily for his reason. But the Gemara does say that the halacha follows his view. In Tanya, we'll end in a brisa. Chananya says, "Uvagoyla ad shisha b'tekufa," that outside of Israel, bagoyla, in the diaspora, you ask for rain until the I'm sorry, you don't ask for rain. Ubagoyla in Golus, you don't ask for rain ad shishim b'tekufa until you have 60 days of the tekufa, meaning into the fall season. Or the literal meaning of tekufa is the equinox, the tekufa. And so it's 60 days after the autumn equinox. Amar Rav Huna bar Chia, Amar Shmuel, halacha kechananya. So the halacha follows Chananya, and it is based on 60 days after the autumn equinox, which ends up being December 4th or December 5th, dependent on if it's a solar leap year or not. And that is basically where we're going to stop. So it means in Israel, the time they start asking for rain, and this is the way it's done today, even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, they ask for rain in Israel from the 7th of Cheshvan, and which is Rabbi Gamliel's opinion. Even though Rabbi Gamliel said it has to do with returning from the pilgrimage, which seemingly doesn't necessarily apply outside, in the time when there's no Beis HaMikdash, but the halacha stays that we still follow that view of 7th of Cheshvan, and in Israel, and outside of Israel, we start December 4th or December 5th, and that has to do with the 60 days after the equinox. And that's what the halacha is even today. Okay, to be continued. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom.